My dad left me nothing, not a dollar, not a letter, not even a word of explanation. But my brother? My brother got everything, the house, the savings, the business, all of it, and I didn't find out until the lawyer started reading the will out loud, in a room full of people, while I sat there, completely blindsided. But here's the part that broke me. I wasn't even surprised, and that was the most painful thing of all. My name is Claire. I'm 34 years old. I grew up in a mid-sized town in Ohio called Millbrook. Nothing special about Millbrook. Quiet streets, the same families in the same houses for 30 years. The kind of town where everybody knows your name and half your business. My dad, Robert, was the kind of man who filled every room he walked into. Not because he was warm, because he was loud. He had opinions about everything: sports, politics, the right way to mow a lawn, the right way to raise a child, his way, always his way. My mom, Sandra, was the opposite: soft, patient, the kind of woman who found something good in everyone, including my father, which took genuine effort. She passed away when I was 16, breast cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to gone, and after that, it was just the three of us: me, my dad, and my brother, Tyler. Tyler was 2 years older than me, and from the moment I was old enough to understand the difference, I knew. I knew Tyler was my father's favorite, not in the small ways parents deny but everyone can see, in the big, undeniable, impossible to explain away ways, the kind that leave marks. If you grew up feeling like you were invisible in your own family, if you ever sat at a dinner table and felt like a guest in your own home, subscribe now, because this story is going to take you somewhere you might recognize, and I promise you, it goes somewhere unexpected. The first time I really understood what was happening, I was 8 years old. Tyler was 10. It was a Saturday in August, the kind of summer day that feels endless when you're a kid. My dad had taken Tyler to a baseball game, a real one, Major League, 3 hours away, just the two of them. I wasn't invited. When I asked why, my dad said, "Tyler plays baseball, you don't." And that was it. That was the whole explanation. I went to my room and cried into my pillow where no one could hear me. My mom found me anyway. She always found me. She sat on the edge of my bed and rubbed my back. "Your dad shows love differently," she said. I didn't know what that meant at 8. I've spent 26 years trying to figure it out. As the years went on, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Tyler got the car when he turned 16. I got a bus pass. Tyler got a graduation party with 60 people in the backyard. I got a dinner at Applebee's. Tyler's college tuition was fully covered. I was told, at 17, over breakfast, that I should look into scholarships. Every single time, there was a reason. Tyler was older. Tyler was the one going into business. Tyler needed it more. There was always a reason, but reasons are just explanations for decisions someone already made, and the decision my father had made, somewhere, sometime, maybe before I was even born, was that Tyler came first. Always Tyler, and I was somewhere else on the list, if I was on the list at all. Here's the thing about growing up like that. You don't just feel unloved, you feel confused because your parent is still there, still at the dinner table, still saying goodnight, still technically present. But emotionally, there's this glass wall, and you can see everything on the other side. You can see your father laughing with your brother. You can see the pride on his face. You can press your hands against the glass and he just doesn't see you. That's not abandonment. It's something quieter and more confusing. And quieter things are harder to name, harder to explain to other people, harder to heal from, because when you try to describe it, it sounds small. He took your brother to a baseball game and not you. So, but it was never just the baseball game. It was all of it. Every baseball game for 30 years. My mom died the November of my sophomore year in high school, and after that, the house changed. The softness left, the patient voice, the person who found the good in everyone. gone. What was left was just my dad and Tyler and me. And without my mom buffering it, the dynamic between us became very clear, very fast. Tyler stepped into the role of man of the house, the way he'd been rehearsing for it his whole life. He was 18. He took on more responsibility. He helped my dad with the business, a small hardware supply company my grandfather had started, and my dad responded to that like a flower responds to sunlight. He opened up. He softened toward Tyler in a way I had never seen him soften. They had dinner conversations I wasn't part of, late nights in the garage, going over business stuff together. A language between them I didn't speak. I was grieving my mother, and I was also grieving the version of my family that died with her. Because before she was gone, at least there was someone who saw me. Now there was just me and the glass wall. I threw myself into school, not because I loved it, because it was the one place where what I did mattered, where my effort was rewarded, where the rules were the same for everyone. I graduated third in my class. I got 2 partial scholarships and took out loans for the rest. I went to Ohio State for journalism. I called home every Sunday. My dad picked up about half the time. When he did, the conversations were short. "How's school?" "Good. Good." And that was it. I came home for Thanksgiving my freshman year. Tyler had just been made co-manager of the hardware business at 21. My dad threw him a dinner, actual cake and everything. I had made Dean's List that semester. I mentioned it over the dinner table. My dad nodded. "Good," he said. Then he turned back to Tyler and asked him about the new inventory system. "Good. That's what I got. Good." I went back to Columbus 2 days early, told my roommate I just wanted to get back for a project. But the truth was, the house just hurt too much, and I was tired of sitting in rooms where I was invisible. Stay with me, because it keeps building, and the worst is still coming. I graduated college, got a job at a small newspaper in Columbus, then moved to a content marketing firm, built a career, built a life, moved into my own apartment, made my own friends, created a world that felt like mine, and slowly, methodically, I reduced the space my family occupied in that world. Not out of anger, out of self-preservation, because every time I went back to Millbrook, I came home carrying something heavy. I'd spend a week recovering, feeling like that 8-year-old pressing her hands against the glass again, and I couldn't keep doing that to myself. So I kept my visits to Christmas and maybe one summer weekend. That was the deal I made with myself. Enough to say I showed up, not so much that it hollowed me out. My dad never asked why I came less, which told me everything. Tyler and I had a complicated relationship through all of this. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't gloating. He just accepted the dynamic as normal. Because for him, it was. He had never known anything different. He had never stood on the outside looking in, so he couldn't see the glass wall from where he was standing. We talked occasionally, texted on birthdays, sometimes called. It wasn't hostile. It was just the relationship that happens when 2 people grow up in the same house and have completely different childhoods. We were polite strangers with shared memories. And then my dad got sick. Stage 3 lung cancer. Tyler called me on a Tuesday morning in March. "Dad's been diagnosed. It's serious." I was in the middle of a work meeting. I walked out into the hallway. I stood there for a moment, and I noticed something that scared me. My first feeling wasn't grief. It was a strange, guilty numbness, like hearing news about someone I used to know. That terrified me, because I didn't want to be someone who felt nothing, even for him, even after everything. I moved back to Millbrook for 8 months. I took remote work. I packed up my life in Columbus and drove back to the house I'd spent years putting distance between myself and. Because he was my father, and whatever he had or hadn't given me, I was not going to let him go through this alone. I cooked. I drove him to appointments. I sat in those waiting rooms. I learned his medication schedule. I dealt with insurance. I did everything a devoted daughter would do. and I told myself I wasn't doing it for his approval. I was doing it because it was right, because my mother would have done it, because I was going to be the person she raised me to be. But I want to be honest with you. Part of me, buried deep, shameful, hoped. Hoped that maybe this was the moment. Maybe this was when he finally saw me, really saw me. Maybe this would change something between us. Maybe I'd get what I'd been standing at that glass wall waiting for 26 years. It didn't happen, not even close. He was kind to me during those months, kinder than he'd ever been. We had some good days, some real conversations. Once, in October, I was sitting next to his bed and he reached over and patted my hand. "You're a good girl, Claire," he said. I cried in the bathroom for 10 minutes after that, because a pat on the hand from my dying father was the most seen I had felt in 30 years. That's how starved I was. That's how long I'd been waiting. He passed in November, quietly, in his sleep. Tyler was with him. I had gone home to my childhood bedroom for the night, and I thought, for the rest of my life, I'll carry that I wasn't there. Tyler was, even at the very end. The reading of the will was 2 weeks after the funeral. My dad's lawyer, a man named Gerald Holt, had an office downtown. Wood-paneled walls, dusty blinds, the kind of place that smelled like old paper and finality. Tyler was there, I was there, my dad's sister, Aunt Patrice, was there, and Gerald Holt sat behind his desk and opened a folder. He went through the formalities first. Personal effects, some items to Aunt Patrice, my dad's watch, his father's watch, to Tyler, his truck to Tyler, the house to Tyler, the hardware business to Tyler, fully, 100% ownership, the savings account, $62,000, to Tyler, and then Gerald Holt turned a page, looked up at me and said, "To my daughter Claire, I leave my mother's jewelry box and its contents." I heard it. I heard every word, but for a second my brain refused to process it. I looked at the lawyer. That's the full extent of the bequest to you, yes." Aunt Patrice made a sound, something between a cough and a gasp. Tyler was looking at the table. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I sat very still. The way you go still when your body is buying time for your mind. "The jewelry box," I said. "Yes." I thought about the house, a 4-bedroom house on a half-acre in Millbrook, worth maybe $350,000 on the current market. I thought about the business, 30 years old, profitable, worth conservatively another $200,000 in assets. I thought about the savings, $62,000, none of it, not a single piece of it, and what I got was a jewelry box, my grandmother's, probably worth a few $100s sentimental value. I turned to Tyler. He was still looking at the table. "Tyler." He looked up. His eyes were red, and I don't know if they were red because he was sad for me, or because he was ashamed, or because he had known. "Did you know?" I asked. Quiet, not angry, just asking. He nodded. Barely, but he nodded. "He told me a few months ago," Tyler said. "He wanted me to know. But not me." He didn't answer, because there was no answer. I picked up my bag. I thanked Gerald Holt. I walked out into the gray November afternoon. I sat in my car for a very long time. And here's the thing I keep coming back to. Even now, I wasn't shocked. I told you that at the beginning, and I meant it. Some part of me had always known this was possible. Because when someone spends 30 years showing you exactly how they value you, you shouldn't be surprised when the final accounting reflects it. But knowing something is possible doesn't mean it doesn't hurt when it happens. It still broke something in me. Something I hadn't even known was still intact. Some last, stubborn thread of hope that maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'd misread it all. Maybe the glass wall was in my head. My dad's will told me the truth. The glass wall was very, very real. And he had built it, deliberately, all the way to the end. If this story is hitting somewhere familiar, if you've ever been handed proof of something you always feared was true, share this. Someone you know needs to hear that they're not alone. I drove back to Columbus that same evening. I didn't go back to the house. I couldn't. I called my closest friend, a woman named Diane, from a rest stop on the highway. I told her what happened. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She said, "Come to mine. I'll make dinner." And I did. And that was the beginning of the rebuild. The months that followed were the hardest of my adult life. Not because of money. I had a job. I had a life. I was financially independent. The money would have helped. I won't pretend otherwise. I had student loans I'd been chipping away at for a decade, a car that needed replacing, savings that were okay but not comfortable. $350,000 would have changed things. But the money wasn't actually the wound. The wound was the message. Every estate plan is a document of your values, of what you thought people were worth. My father sat down with Gerald Holt and made deliberate decisions. He didn't forget me. He chose this. He looked at his 2 children and he decided, and living with that knowledge was something no amount of money could have fixed. I started therapy. A woman named Dr. Anita Reeves, who had a small office near my apartment. I went every Thursday at noon. I told her everything. The baseball game when I was 8, the dean's list, the pat on the hand, the will, all of it. She listened, and then, one Thursday, she said something I've thought about every week since. "Claire, you have been trying to earn love from someone who wasn't capable of giving it the way you needed. That is not a failure on your part. That's a limitation on his." I sat with that for a long time because part of me didn't want to let him off the hook. Part of me wanted to believe he could have done better and chose not to. And maybe both things were true. Maybe he had a limitation, and maybe he still chose it. Maybe people can be limited and still responsible for how their limitations harm others. I don't know. I'm still working on it. What I do know is that somewhere in those months, something shifted. The grief started to change shape. I stopped grieving the father I had. I started grieving the one I never got to have. And those are 2 very different griefs. The second one is quieter, more honest, and eventually, it lets you breathe. I poured myself into work, into friendships, into building a life so full and so mine that there was no room left for the hollow place. I got a promotion. I moved into a bigger apartment. I started writing again. Really writing. The kind I'd abandoned when I traded journalism for a steady paycheck. I started a blog, personal essays, about family, about growing up feeling invisible, about what it costs to love someone who can't love you back fully. People read it, a lot of people, more than I expected. And the comments and messages I got were overwhelming. Hundreds of them, from people who said, "I thought I was the only one. I grew up like this. How did you say exactly what I felt for 40 years?" That was the moment I understood something important. The experience of being the unfavored child is not rare. It is shockingly, heartbreakingly common, and the people who live it spend their whole lives thinking they're alone in it. We are not alone, not even close. And that knowledge changed something in me. It turned the grief into something with a purpose, not into something good, but into something useful. And useful is enough. Hold on, because Tyler calls me 14 months later, and what he says changes everything again. It was a Tuesday afternoon in January, 14 months after the reading of the will. I was at my desk. My phone rang. Tyler, I almost didn't answer. We hadn't spoken since that day in Gerald Holt's office. Not a text, not an email, nothing. The silence had been mutual and unspoken. I answered. "Hey," he said. "Hey." Long pause. "Can I come to Columbus? I need to talk to you in person." I thought about saying no. I thought about how many times I had needed things from my family and hadn't gotten them. "When?" I said. He came that Saturday. We met at a coffee shop near my apartment. He looked worse than I expected. Thinner, eyes tired. He sat down and ordered a coffee and didn't touch it. "I have to tell you something," he said. "Okay." "About Dad, about the will." "Tyler!" "Just let me say it." I sat back. "There's a letter," he said. I went still. "What do you mean, a letter?" "Dad wrote you a letter. He gave it to me before he died. He told me to give it to you after the will was read." I stared at him. "You've had a letter from Dad for 14 months. "Yeah, and you're only giving it to me now." He reached into his jacket pocket. He put an envelope on the table between us. My name on the front. My dad's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. The looping R, the way he always pressed too hard with the pen. I looked at it for a long time. Then I looked at Tyler. "Why did you wait?" He rubbed his face with both hands. "Because I read it." "You read my letter?" "Yes." "Tyler." I know. I read it, and then I didn't know what to do with what it said, and I kept thinking I'd find the right moment, but there wasn't one. And then 14 months went by, and I couldn't live with it anymore." "What does it say?" He shook his head. "You should read it yourself." I picked up the envelope. I turned it over. My dad had sealed it with tape, not just the flap. He'd taped over the edges, too. The way someone does when they really need to know it stayed closed. I opened it carefully. 2 pages, his handwriting, small and pressed, and I read it, right there in the coffee shop. I'm going to tell you what it said, because it's the part of this story that I didn't expect, the part that changed the whole shape of everything that came before. He started by saying he knew what he had done, not in vague terms, specifically. He named moments. The baseball game. He named it. The graduation. He named it. He said he had been unfair to me, that he had always known it, that there was no excuse that made it okay. Then he explained. Not excused, explained where it came from. He wrote about his own father, my grandfather, who I'd only met twice, who apparently had done the same thing to him, who had a favorite, my dad's older brother, and made no effort to hide it, who left his estate unequally divided, who died without ever acknowledging what he'd done. And my dad wrote that he had promised himself he would be different. He had promised himself he would not repeat it, and then he had repeated it anyway. He wrote, "I don't understand why. I've tried to understand for 30 years. The closest I can come is this. Tyler looked like me. Tyler moved like me. Tyler wanted what I wanted, and when I looked at you, I saw your mother, and after she died, I couldn't bear it. Looking at you hurt in a way I didn't know how to survive, so I looked away. And I kept looking away, and by the time I understood what that had cost you, I didn't know how to fix it." I stopped reading. I looked up at the ceiling. I breathed. Then I kept reading. He wrote about the will. He said he knew it was wrong. He said he had justified it to himself with reasons about the business and the house and Tyler's role in the company. But then he wrote, "The truth is, I was a coward. I couldn't look you in the eye and give you what you deserved, because that would have meant admitting what I'd taken from you. This letter is what I could give instead of everything I should have given you. I know it isn't enough. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I saw you, Claire. I always saw you. I was just too broken to show you, and I am sorry. I am more sorry than I know how to say." 2 pages, ending with, "You are the best of your mother, and I wasted 30 years being afraid of that instead of grateful for it." I folded the letter. I put it back in the envelope. I set it on the table, and I looked at Tyler. His eyes were wet. Mine were too, but I didn't wipe them. "He told you what was in it," I said. "Yeah." "Did he tell you to wait?" "No, that was me. I was afraid of what you'd do with it." "What do you mean?" Tyler looked down at his coffee cup. "I was afraid that once you read it, you'd be done with me too." I hadn't expected that. "Why?" Because I knew. I always knew it was unequal. And I never said anything. I benefited from it my whole life, and I never pushed back, and I told myself it wasn't my place, and his voice broke. I'm not him, Claire, but I'm not innocent either. The coffee shop was quiet around us. Two people at separate tables, neither of us speaking. And I thought about all of it. The baseball game, the graduation, the dean's list, the will, the letter, Tyler knowing and staying quiet, my dad seeing me and not being able to show it, all of it at once. And here is what I felt, something I genuinely did not expect. Relief, not because the letter fixed anything, not because it gave back what was taken, but because I had always wondered, in my darkest moments, if maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the glass wall was in my head. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I had misread a man who actually loved me equally, and I was just not seeing it right. The letter answered that. He saw it. He did it. He knew. And there is a painful, bitter, necessary mercy in finally knowing you weren't crazy, in having someone look at you through the glass and say, "Yes, I could see you the whole time. I'm sorry I couldn't open the door." Tyler and I sat in that coffee shop for 3 hours. We talked about things we had never said out loud before, the household we grew up in, what we each experienced, how the same father had given us completely different childhoods. Neither of us had known the full picture. I didn't know Tyler had carried guilt. He didn't know the full weight of what the inequality had cost me. And there was something healing in just saying it all, not pretending, not protecting anyone. Just the truth between two people who shared a history and were trying to figure out what to do with it. I won't tell you Tyler and I are best friends now. That would be too neat. Real life is, rarely neat. But we talk. Real talking. Not the polite stranger conversation we had for years. Actual talking. And that is more than I had. So it's something. I still have my dad's letter. I keep it in the jewelry box, the one thing he left me, and sometimes I take it out and read it again, not looking for more than it says, not trying to make it bigger than it is. Just as a reminder that people are complicated beyond what we can see from the outside, that damaged people damage people, and sometimes they know exactly what they're doing and can't stop. That love and failure can exist in the same person at the same time, that you can spend your whole life waiting for someone to open a door they didn't know how to open, and that the healthiest thing you can ever do is stop waiting and build your own. I am not the girl pressing her hands against the glass anymore. I am 34 years old. I have a career I built myself. I have friendships that are honest and mutual and full. I have a blog read by thousands of people who say, "You said what I couldn't." I have a life that is entirely, completely, unapologetically mine, and I have a jewelry box. Inside it is my grandmother's jewelry. Inside, it is a letter from my father. Inside it is 30 years of being unseen and surviving it anyway, and somehow, impossibly, that box holds more than the house ever could. Here is what I want you to take with you. If you are the unfavored child, or were, you are not what was done to you. The accounting your parent made of your worth is not accurate. It was never accurate. It reflected their limitations, their fears, their unresolved wounds, not your value. You are not someone else's inventory. You do not have to earn love in the place that should have given it freely. And you are allowed to grieve what you didn't get. You are allowed to be angry. You are allowed to name it clearly and say, "This was wrong." And then, when you're ready, you are allowed to build something that has nothing to do with them at all. That is not betrayal. That is survival. That is the most honest form of love you can give yourself. I'm Claire. I'm 34. And I got the jewelry box. Turns out it was enough. If this story meant something to you, if you grew up feeling invisible in your own family and you've never heard someone say it out loud, please share this. Someone in your life, needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. And thank you for watching all the way to the end. It means more than you know.